It began like any other high-profile political event. Charlie Kirk, a well-known conservative activist and founder of Turning Point USA, was set to deliver a fiery speech to a packed audience. Supporters filled the hall, cameras rolled, and the atmosphere was electric. To many, it was another routine day in American politics. Debate, controversy, and the usual mix of supporters and protesters. But no one could have predicted that this event would end in chaos, bloodshed, and national tragedy. The scene shifted from excitement to horror in seconds. As Kirk took the stage, the crack of a rifle echoed, drowning out the crowd's cheers. Panic spread like wildfire. Screams filled the auditorium as security rushed to shield the podium. People ducked for cover, unsure of where the shots came from. By the time the room cleared, the unimaginable had already happened. Charlie Kirk had been fatally shot. News alerts spread instantly, first on social media, then across national headlines. Within minutes, the phrase "Charlie Kirk assassinated" was trending worldwide. What began as a day for political dialogue became a day America would never forget. But this wasn't just a random act of violence. This was a calculated political assassination, planned with precision and fueled by extremist ideology. The shooter wasn't a nameless criminal. He had motives, beliefs, and a mission. And now, investigators, journalists, and citizens alike were asking the same question. Why was Charlie Kirk targeted? In this first chapter, we will set the stage. Who Charlie Kirk was and why his presence on the political stage made him a lightning rod for controversy. The events leading up to that day. The buildup of tension, threats, and rhetoric that surrounded him. The chilling moment of the attack, reconstructed from eyewitnesses and footage. This was more than just the killing of a man. It was a message, one that speaks to the rising tide of political violence in America. And as we peel back the layers of this case, we'll discover just how dangerous that tide has become. While the nation reeled in shock, investigators turned their focus to the one question everyone demanded an answer to: who pulled the trigger, and why? The assassin wasn't a shadowy figure hiding in the dark. He was a young man whose face and name quickly surfaced in the media. Within hours of his arrest, his social media accounts, online posts, and digital trail painted a disturbing picture of radicalization. He had once been an ordinary American. Friends described him as quiet, even reserved. But something changed. His online presence revealed a growing obsession with political extremism, violent rhetoric, and conspiracy theories. His posts escalated over time, from frustration with the political system to open hostility toward conservative leaders, to finally, direct threats against Charlie Kirk himself. The assassin's motive became clearer with every piece of evidence. To him, Kirk wasn't just a man, he was a symbol, a representative of an ideology the shooter despised, a voice amplified in the media, a target that would make headlines worldwide. Killing Kirk wasn't random. It was strategic. It was meant to send a message. But what pushed him over the edge? Investigators uncovered three key drivers. Ideological extremism. He immersed himself in radical online communities that glorified violence as a solution to political conflict. Isolation and anger. Friends noticed he withdrew from real-world relationships, living instead through online forums that fed his resentment. A desire for infamy, in journals later discovered. He wrote that killing Kirk would make him part of history, a chilling glimpse into his craving for recognition. In many ways, this assassin followed a pattern seen in other extremist killers. He wasn't just attacking an individual, he was targeting an entire movement, an entire worldview. And he believed violence was the only way to be heard. This chapter doesn't just ask who killed Charlie Kirk, but why. By examining the assassin's life, we begin to see how political rhetoric, online radicalization, and personal despair can converge into a deadly outcome. As the investigation deepened, the FBI and local law enforcement pieced together his movements leading up to the assassination. The surveillance, the weapon acquisition, the rooftop vantage point, everything pointed to chilling premeditation. He wasn't acting on impulse. He had been planning this for weeks. The more we uncover about the shooter's mind, the more unsettling the truth becomes. He believed this was only the beginning. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, hit the notification bell. They say violence rarely arrives without a trace. In the days after the shooting, investigators discovered that this had not been a spontaneous outburst. It was the product of a methodical, single-minded plan. In itself, that realization made the killing more terrifying. It wasn't chaos, but calculation. And that made everyone who stepped on a stage, stood before a crowd, or broadcast a message feel suddenly exposed. This chapter peels back the curtain on the planning. How the assassin watched, learned, and chose the moment, and how a million tiny decisions added up to murder. From the first interviews and court documents, a pattern emerged. The shooter had spent weeks, maybe months, studying Charlie Kirk's public appearances. He tracked schedules, monitored social media for event announcements, and paid attention to the routines that made public figures predictable. Where most people saw rallies and speeches as routine, he saw opportunity. His preparation had three clear phases: observation, rehearsals, and contingency thinking. Each phase shows a mind moving from anger to action. Observation. He was meticulous. He studied the rhythm of events, entrance routes, the flow of the audience, the timing of speeches. He spent long hours watching recorded footage and live streams, not as a fan but as a student of patterns. He noted where cameras were placed, when security would be engaged, and how crowds reacted when a speaker appeared. This research wasn't academic curiosity. It was how he found weaknesses in the system of protection that surrounds public figures. Rehearsal. Planning a violent act is, chillingly, a rehearsal in the abstract. He practiced scenarios in his head and in the real world, but not in a way that would be useful to copy or replicate. Witnesses later recalled seeing someone loitering near the venue on multiple days before the event. Always with a phone, always with the same distracted expression. To prosecutors, that pattern painted a picture of someone rehearsing how he would blend in, how he would not attract attention before the moment he intended. Contingency thinking. The assassin's writings and chats, recovered during the investigation, revealed he had considered failure. He planned escape routes on paper and imagined what he would say and how he would be perceived if he were caught. None of these details are useful to repeat here. The chilling detail is less in the mechanics than the mindset. Someone willing to practice how to fail and to accept the consequences. That acceptance, the belief that the act itself was the point, is a trait common to many politically motivated killers. How did law enforcement piece this puzzle together? The investigation blended old-fashioned detective work with modern digital forensics. Phone records, social media activity, and surveillance footage were matched with human testimony. A friend might say, "He seemed off," while a timestamp on a post showed a different side of the same day. A neighbor's recollection of a late-night trip became more significant when paired with GPS pings. Definitions that once lived separately, the analog and the algorithmic, became one narrative thread. Yet, for all the digital paper trail, there were also signs of human miscalculation. The shooter misreads simple things. The level of security at certain entrances, the unpredictable movement of crowds, the way a small delay or a lone security guard could upend his timeline. That misreading did not stop him, but it did make the attack messier in ways that ultimately helped investigators identify him. Mistakes like these, in the plan and in the execution, are what often bring conspiracies to light. Importantly, this chapter avoids writing a manual. We won't and mustn't describe step-by-step tactics or the technical specifics that would enable another attacker. Instead, we focus on the human story behind the planning, obsession, escalation, and the substitution of ideology for empathy. The day of the event was, on paper, ordinary. Staff did their usual checks, volunteers set up chairs, and seats filled with people expecting a speech. A festival of opinions, a war of ideas, until it became a crime scene. The shooter's plan depended on the element of surprise and on the drama of the moment to amplify the message he wanted to send. He chose a public forum because, in his mind, the spectacle would carry his act beyond a local headline. He wanted attention. He wanted to force a conversation. Eyewitness accounts that weaved through the early news cycles described the same surreal sequence. A normal morning turned catastrophic in a heartbeat. People who were only there to listen found themselves cataloging details that later became critical to the investigation. Descriptions of a person on a balcony, a flash near an upper level, a sound that didn't fit the event. Those fragments, when collected, form the mosaic that detectives used to reconstruct the attack. Two forces combined to break the plan apart. First, imperfect execution. A delay here, an unanticipated movement of a technician there, created a chaotic but traceable trail. Second, real people reacted in ways the shooter had not predicted. Attendants ushered people away, a volunteer's quick thinking altered the crowd's configuration, and security's rapid response introduced new variables. These responses, ordinary acts of human care and confusion, created leads. They also saved lives. The aftermath was immediate and messy. Law enforcement sealed off the area. Evidence was collected, photographed, and cataloged. Investigators began building a timeline of the shooter's final hours, then his final weeks, and finally the years that led to the moment. Motive and method became two sides of the same coin. The method, how he tried to do it, revealed the motive, why he believed it had to be done. Court filings later revealed a disturbing level of premeditation, and prosecutors used that to argue for the severity of the charges. Defense attorneys pointed to mental deterioration, a history of isolation, and claims of online harassment as context. The legal battle that followed became another chapter in the national conversation. How do we assign responsibility when a person claims ideology and mental illness as co-drivers? How does the justice system balance punishment with attempts at prevention? For viewers and readers, there's a final, urgent takeaway from this chapter. Public spaces are both vulnerable and resilient. The spaces that host our debates are not only stages for ideas but also potential targets. Yet the human responses, from a security guard shielding a child to an organizer lifting a fallen mic stand to cover a doorway, show that communities are capable of thwarting greater harm when ordinary people act. When the shots rang out and chaos swept through the auditorium, the killer might have believed he would vanish into the crowd, remembered only for the violence of the moment. But investigations, unlike assassinations, unfold with patience, precision, and relentless pursuit. What began with frightened eyewitnesses soon became a nationwide operation to uncover every piece of the puzzle. Who was the shooter? How did he plan this? And how could justice be delivered? The breakthroughs. The first break in the case came within hours. Multiple witnesses described seeing a suspicious figure near a restricted area just before the shooting. Surveillance cameras confirmed it. A man lingering at an upper level, carrying a bag heavy enough to draw notice. Police locked down the area, and forensic teams scoured the scene. Inside the bag, they found personal belongings, ammunition, and digital devices. A treasure trove of evidence. Fingerprints, DNA traces, and ballistic testing quickly tied the weapon to the suspect. Phone records revealed his movements, showing not only his presence at the venue but also visits to nearby rooftops in the days prior. Investigators pieced together a chilling timeline of reconnaissance. Digital forensics painted an even darker picture. The suspect's laptop and phone contained journals, saved manifestos, and chat logs that openly fantasized about political assassinations. He had rehearsed the justification in writing long before he carried it out. His online searches were damning. Schedules of events, weapon handling tutorials, and extremist propaganda. The arrest. The suspect's capture was swift. Cornered in a nearby building, he surrendered without resistance. For some, his calm demeanor was even more chilling than the violence itself. He spoke little, offered no remorse, and insisted that the message had already been delivered. His lack of reaction hardened public outrage and underscored prosecutors' claims of cold premeditation. The courtroom drama. The trial became a stage almost as charged as the one where the crime had occurred. Prosecutors built their case around intent, premeditation, and ideological extremism. They laid out the evidence step by step. The weapon, the surveillance footage, the writings, the digital trail. Their argument was clear. This was not the act of an unstable man in the grip of impulse. This was an assassination carefully planned to send a message of terror. The defense countered with a narrative of mental decline. They argued that the accused had slipped into paranoia, driven by loneliness, economic struggles, and untreated mental illness. They painted him as a man unmoored from reality, more a victim of circumstance than a mastermind of violence. The clash between these two narratives, extremist ideologue or disturbed loner, dominated headlines for weeks. The nation watching. Every day of the trial was broadcast, dissected, and debated. Cable news panels replayed testimony, while social media lit up with arguments over whether this was the symptom of broader political extremism or a single man's descent into madness. Hashtags trended, dividing Americans along familiar ideological lines. For the family and supporters of Charlie Kirk, the trial was agony. They sat in the courtroom, watching as the man accused of killing their son, brother, and friend became the center of public spectacle. Each detail, from the planning to the motive, felt like salt in a wound that would never fully heal. The verdict, when the jury finally returned, the silence was suffocating. Guilty on all counts: murder, use of a firearm in a political assassination, and acts of domestic terrorism. The courtroom erupted, relief for some, grief for others, and a chilling reminder of the weight of justice. The sentencing phase was its own battle. Prosecutors sought the maximum penalty, arguing that anything less would embolden future attackers. The defense pleaded for life without parole, citing the defendant's mental state. In the end, the judge delivered a life sentence, ensuring the assassin would never again walk free. The larger meaning: this chapter of the story isn't just about legal procedure. It's about what the trial revealed: the intersection of political hate, digital radicalization, and a justice system struggling to respond to a new era of extremist violence. The verdict closed one chapter but opened another question. How many more are out there, watching, waiting, radicalizing online? The courtroom gave justice to one crime, but it could not resolve the growing tide of political violence in America. The guilty verdict might have closed the courtroom chapter, but outside those walls, the shockwaves of Charlie Kirk's assassination continued to ripple across the nation. What happened wasn't just the silencing of a political figure. It was the loud reminder that America is standing on dangerous ground, where political differences are no longer just fought with words, but with weapons. The immediate fallout. In the weeks after the murder, universities, political organizations, and campaign rallies all tightened security. Metal detectors, bag checks, and heavily armed officers became a common sight. Places once meant for open debate began to feel like fortresses. For many, it raised an unsettling question. Can democracy survive if public spaces feel too dangerous for dialogue? Supporters of Kirk held vigils, lighting candles and laying flowers outside Turning Point USA offices and campuses across the country. For them, his death was not just tragic. It was martyrdom, proof of the risks faced by outspoken voices in an increasingly hostile climate. At the same time, critics wrestled with the broader meaning. Was this assassination an isolated act of extremism, or a symptom of something larger festering in American society? Pattern emerging. Looking back, Kirk's murder was not a single spark but part of a disturbing pattern. Political figures, journalists, and activists have increasingly become targets of threats, plots, and attacks. Extremists, whether driven by ideology, conspiracy theories, or the hunger for infamy, see violence as their tool to force change. The FBI has warned of lone actor terrorism, where individuals radicalized online act without orders, but with devastating precision. Kirk's assassination fit that mold perfectly, and with each incident, the threshold of political violence in America seemed to lower. The human cost, lost in the headlines, was the most painful truth. A family broken, a movement shaken, and a nation robbed of the possibility of debate without fear. For Kirk's family, no sentence could restore the man they loved. For his followers, his absence left a vacuum, one filled with both grief and defiance. And for everyday Americans, the shooting deepened a creeping anxiety that simply attending a rally, a speech, or a protest could make you a target. The lessons. What does Charlie Kirk's assassination teach us? Words can fuel violence. Political rhetoric, when weaponized, doesn't just polarize, it radicalizes. The internet is a battleground. Online spaces have become incubators for extremist thought, where anger can quickly turn into deadly action. Security has limits, no matter how many guards or scanners, The real solution must come from addressing the root causes of extremism. America stands at a crossroads. Either the nation confronts the rise of political violence, or it risks normalizing it. The closing message. Charlie Kirk's assassination will be remembered not only for the man who died, but for what it revealed about the times we live in. It showed us the fragility of public life, the consequences of unchecked hate, and the terrifying ease with which an idea can turn into a bullet. As America looks forward, the real question remains: will we learn from this, or will political violence continue to escalate? Final note for viewers. This was the story of assassination in America, the shocking murder of Charlie Kirk and the rise of political violence. If this deep dive opened your eyes to the dangers we face, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more powerful true crime stories that reveal the hidden truths behind the headlines. Your support helps us bring these stories to light and remind the world that every crime tells a bigger story.